you know the story.
Yes.
And extension system is very important to do that. Yeah.
Perfect. I will.
Yeah.
No problem.
Because your project that you have given me exactly is doing that.
Excellent. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you can take the seat, we'll get going. Please take your seat if you are listening and use the headset for listening to. Please come and take a seat. You are going to get started now. This session is about how do we connect NDC goals, the NAP goals at the national level to action on the ground. And that is we are going to be focusing on because it's a food and agriculture pavilion. Obviously, we are going to be focusing on food systems transformation. Is it working? Okay. Food system transformation, and in that process, what kind of comprehensive action that we can take to provide climate resilient food and agricultural systems. And there are several actors and players in that process, and we will give some bit of introduction to that. But one of the major players there to translate the programs into action on the ground is the extension system. And often these systems are in trouble because they are publicly funded. Over the last 20 years, of course, we have seen more and more private sector coming in, NGO sector coming in to do extension services, but they are not nearly enough for the scale of the problem that we are facing, not just in the food systems perspective, but also on the climate side of it. So how do we bring actors and players together and also mainstream the current extension systems to work with climate actions? And that's the subject of this side event. I should be using the next, moving the... So I just give you a brief introduction to the issues, and then we will invite the panelists who are here to talk about. But before I go further, I would like to introduce Molly here, Molly Hilmath, who is the leader of a program funded by USAID. It's a comprehensive action for climate change initiative, under which we are implementing several activities, including the extension system activities. Molly, why don't you give us an introduction, then we'll take it from there.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you to IFPRI for the invitation. Good afternoon to everyone, and to those who are listening online, good day. As Suresh mentioned, I am the Senior Project Director for the Comprehensive Action for Climate Change Initiative, which is a U.S. government-funded program that supports countries in their NDC and NAP journeys. So we work from policy to all the way to practice, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. CASI supports the U.S. government's Feed the Future initiative to boost agricultural-led growth, resilience, and nutrition through facilitating partnerships across sectors, supporting ambitious national policies, building technical capacity, and mobilizing private sector investment. We're committed to helping countries transform their agri-food systems through their NDCs and their NAPs. A key component to building sustainable food systems is strengthening agriculture extension services. CASI recognizes that public sector extension services have a valuable role to play as a primary and trusted resource for climate resilience and sustainable agriculture. We also recognize that extension services are increasingly pluralistic. As Suresh mentioned, there are a lot of actors who are coming in to support. And that the private sector in particular is emerging as one of the service providers in many countries. This is in part because the private sector recognizes that even among smallholder farmers, you can build long-term customer loyalty and trust through the provision of technical information and support. There are many examples of extension support by the private sector, including input suppliers, seed companies, aggregators, traders, and processors, who are increasingly packaging technical information alongside their products and services. For example, CASI partner, so we, as part of the CASI initiative, we actually have a program called the Partnership for Climate Action, where we support private sector actors in supporting NDC and NAP achievement. And we have over $20 billion of investments committed to the Partnership for Climate Action. One of our partners, VIA, has worked with PT Bumdesa in Indonesia to bring wireless connectivity to remote villages. This technology is then a platform that can be used by a variety of other private sector actors and service providers, including for deployment of precision agriculture. So that is what is happening in this collection and aggregation of villages in Indonesia. CASI is also exploring opportunities to integrate climate resilient services throughout the food system. We're working very closely with IFPRI on food loss and food waste, in particular including with post-harvest buyers and processors, but also at the national government level to integrate food loss and food waste into NDCs. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about the agricultural extension reforms and activities that IFPRI's been undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. We'll be continuing, but before I move on to a quick overview presentation for all of us to come to the same page of what we are talking about, I want to introduce our panelists who have come. Welcome from Fiji, Mr. Tekini. Molly I already introduced, she's here, and we have Adit Murthy from Bhumitra. We have Marcelo Mena Carrasco, Global Methane Hub, and we have Sino Tohir Zoda from Tajikistan, and of course, finally, not but least, Yeshi Lendab from Bhutan. They all bring different perspectives to the extension work they are doing and how they are connecting with the farmers. But before that, let me give a quick overview of what are the issues that we are facing, and then we bring the perspectives of the panelists. Broadly, like I said briefly, the issues of climate change and integration of those issues with agricultural sector, food system transformation is still debated and talked at the country level. And there is also a challenge how the climate change sector, so to speak, climate directorate, which mostly sits in Ministry of Environment, and the Ministry of Agriculture, which deals with the food systems and agriculture, how do they come together, integrate and work together is still an issue. And within that, how are the various institutions, say agricultural research, agricultural education, agricultural extension, while they are part of broader agricultural innovation system, how do they operate in order to take the climate goals and put that into action? That's still a question. And that's where we are focusing here today on extension system, which is very crucial for taking knowledge and information to the farmers. Just moving on, we know about this story. I don't want to repeat it. The climate change has huge impact on agriculture sector. In turn, agriculture sector also contributes to climate change in a way that we can work on. To the extent that agriculture contributes, food systems contribute to climate change, we also have a responsibility to work in that sector to address that contribution. And that's when we can achieve the net zero, right? All the sectors have to work together. So to what extent agriculture can do depends on what are the institutions within agriculture that can contribute to that kind of a goal. So let me move on. And one of the key sectors within agriculture sector, broadly subsectors, is the agricultural extension system, advisory services we call it. And they play an important role in taking knowledge, information, not only from technology and innovation perspective, but also they connect farmers to the markets. They also work on issues that come up, disasters and seed systems, for example, emergency supply of inputs. All these are done by agricultural extension, and more importantly, now they are called upon to do climate change work. For example, carbon sequestration. And how do we prepare them? How do we help them to do their job better is something that we should be thinking about. And they face a lot of challenges. Public extension system, particularly those who come from global south, we know that it's been going down in terms of number of people engaged. It's been going down in terms of the finances that they get. Now it's been going down in terms of coordination of that group with research and other groups that bring knowledge and information to the farmers. It's been going down in terms of their connection to the input suppliers. So there are lots of players and actors, but the coordination mechanism in the public extension system has not been strong in many developing countries. It was strong if you think about 30, 40 years ago during the Green Revolution period, if you think about that way. But then it has weakened over the time. So how do we revive that in the context of climate action? Because they have to do a lot of climate-related work. So that's the broad thinking here. And we have been having national level consultations on this issue. And I will just give some examples from Indonesia, Nepal, and India, where we do think that multidisciplinary approach is very important for extension. It's not just technology transfer. Extension system is called upon to do marketing. They're called upon to do now climate change issues. How do we prepare them? That's the issue, right? And how do we engage them in terms of the goals that they can work towards in NDC, the goals and the National Adaptation Plan goals, because these systems are not talking to each other, right? And they are there, but how do we connect them? How do we improve the policy process, and how do we bring the nature-based solutions that we are talking about through the extension system, both in the context of mitigation and adaptation? And of course, Molly already talked about the CASI program that we have been working on in the last 2.5 years in different countries, and our country colleagues will talk a little bit about, and we are also working with Global Methane Hub for taking the innovations that are already there to reduce the methane in the rice fields, for example, in South India, that we will talk about, because this extension system is crucial for that kind of behavioral change, adoption of new innovations and technologies, and even for technologies that bring carbon sequestration to the farmers, right? So from that perspective, we will hear today from the panelists, what is that going on in their system? We have private sector here, we have government sector here, we are also the climate ministry, Environment Ministry colleagues, and the National Planning Commission people here, and of course program Global Methane Hub. We have brought together all these different perspectives to hear from them what is that is needed in terms of moving forward to bring together at the country level, not only on the policy side, but institutional reforms, as well as at the grassroots level to reach out to the farmers to change the technology innovations that farmers are already following towards climate action, so that we can achieve the agriculture food system part of net zero through our work. So with that brief introduction, let me ask the panelists to come up. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll put one more chair there to the podium. Adit, why don't you take a chair? Thank you. Please come. Yeah, please. Marcelo, please take your chair. I'm glad I already introduced them briefly, but as you can see, they come from different perspectives. Careful, don't want to fall down, right? They come from different perspectives. We purposefully put this panel together, right? It's on the one hand, you want to hear from the public extension system from a national perspective, what are the challenges that they are facing. We have a colleague from Fiji who will address that, and then from the climate perspective, looking from the national coordination of nationally determined contributions perspective, how agriculture sector can contribute, that we have a colleague from Tajikistan, Sino, is here. The private sector who is seriously working with the farmers in helping the farmers to connect with the credit markets as well as to do carbon sequestration, Bhumitra. They are also connecting artificial intelligence and modern technology to the farmers' field. And Adit will talk about that, and my colleague Marcelo will talk about how the Global Methane Hub is trying to work from their perspective to address this particular issue of methane, which is we call often low-hanging fruit, right, in agriculture. And we will talk from then, of course, from Bhutan. Bhutan has made a lot of progress in the climate sense. The forestry area is huge, and they worked on it even to some extent at the expense of agriculture, and there is issue going on. How do we achieve food security when we have to maintain certain level of forestry land? And they are dealing with that in Bhutan, but then they have made a lot of progress. From that perspective, we'll be hearing different views, and we'll open it for question and answers, and we'll discuss. Feel free to bring in your questions as well. Let's start with a government perspective. Government of Fiji, Ministry of Agriculture, a small country but very vulnerable to climate change, and they have been at the forefront of climate fight. And I was recently there and looking at the intensive farming that is happening, and how climate action can actually be contributing to making the farming systems more sustainable, more climate friendly, and of course, the adaptation to the climate change that we are facing. Go ahead, please, from ministry perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Tekini Nakindakinda from the Ministry of Agriculture in Fiji. So, once a junior officer and now sitting at a management level, I could see the challenge of getting our extension officers to where they are supposed to be. That is with the farmers and contributing to farmers' development and transferring knowledge from research to the farm. The extension officers are heavily under-resourced. So resource is probably, I think, means of implementation in what we are discussing in negotiations for agriculture. Is that how we can drive these means of implementation into the countries. And resourcing extension officers is key to ensure that whatever we are discussing at a high level or in the research stations reach the farmers. If they don't reach, if this information or all these technologies don't reach the farmers on time, it is a waste of money, waste of time. So I had to influence management to try and frame policies that can drive resources or channel resources into the extension divisions. So upgrade their resources, improve connectivity. All those are interlinked, and in traditional settings, farmers are also very conservative about culture and tradition. And these are something that the extension officers should be understanding when they are trying to promote innovations. How best it can be adopted so that farmers, while they are dear to tradition and culture, they also adopt innovations that are proven by science that can help build their resilience. So again, from the government perspective, is that resourcing extension officers through physical resource, financial resource, and also improving their connectivity in a distant geographical area where they may be. Because every time I come after COP and go back to the country, it's sad to see that the flow of information is very slow. It's basically due to poor resourcing. So we thank FAO, we thank partners that are working with us in order to try and leverage all those challenges that are being faced by extension officers. Trying to reach their areas of responsibility in terms of farmers' development, farmers' livelihood being improved, contributing to livelihood change, socio-economic development, and also economic development of the nation. So when timely implementation, it goes back to resource management, and it goes back to the higher level of achievements. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to you on specifics of what innovations we can introduce in using the limited resources that you have. At the same time, the reach that you have to have to the farmers with limited number probably of the extension workers, also limited financial resources that they operate with. Let's come back to that issue in the context of we are adding climate change to their portfolio. They are already struggling with their technology innovations and so on. But how can we synergize the technologies that are also climate oriented? Let's think about it as we go along. We'll come back to you. But then I will just go in the order of colleagues sitting here. Mr. Sino, coming from Tajikistan, is the national coordinator of NDC. He deals with all the sectors, but particularly in agriculture sector. Sino, Tajikistan perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Suresh. Thank you, colleagues, for having me here. My name is Sino Tahirzoda. I work in the Committee for Environmental Protection in Tajikistan. And as Suresh pointed out, I'm dealing with the NDC implementation in our country. Before I want to reflect on Suresh's question and comments that the colleagues, the topics bringing here, I would like to give a small and brief perspective on Tajikistan itself as a country. We are a mountainous country, and 93% of the country territory are covered by the mountains. I'm pretty sure we are in top 5 countries in terms of the percentage of the mountains coverage in the country, as long as Nepal, Bhutan, and a few other countries. But 93% is a really huge number in terms of this parameter, and for us the agriculture and climate change are extremely important, because 93% mountains and also 70% 70% of the population lives in the live in the mountain areas, and also dealing in the agriculture sector, living in the rural areas. So these two numbers, I think by itself, without any explanation, already gives you a perspective of how extremely important the agriculture and food security NDCs are in our country. And I think this is why Tajikistan is a front line of water, glaciers agenda worldwide. As you know, last year in New York, Tajikistan and Netherlands, we co-chaired the second UN water conference in the history of UN. The first one, and before the next year, the only one was held in Argentina almost 50 years ago. So why it took us 50 years globally to have the second water conference under the UN? Why is it still under the question that are we going to meet the targets of the NDC in terms of the national capacities, while we have the 2030 as a target? So I think these all questions bring us to the point where we have to identify on the national and regional and global levels what are the real targets that we will really meet. For Tajikistan, it's NDC. It's also one of the most ambitious documents globally, because we decrease the GHG emissions from 60 to 70%. So we have several scenarios, but the minimum is we decrease the GHG emissions by 60%. So also this is a huge number that requires a huge efforts. And in our NDC, the agriculture sector is the biggest because of the mountains, because of the biggest number of people who live in rural areas. So that's why we really need to adjust and to have this transfer technology regarding to our farmers, regarding to the work they do, regarding the system that they use, regarding the outcomes that they have. So I think that's why the job we do in the NDC update, the job we do together with USAID and IFPRI is really important for us. And as we stand the next year for the next NDC update, I think this is really the critical and important moment, how we reflect those changes that we need to bring in order to achieve the targets there. Because the agriculture sector is the biggest one. I think if we cannot make it in the agriculture sector in particular, then the whole NDC will not be achievable for us. So therefore, we really appreciate such dialogues, such knowledge sharing, experiences that we have within the different countries, the practices that we have, and we look forward to fruitful discussions and open to your questions and further comments. Thank you, Suresh.
Thank you, Sino. Sino also is facing on a day-to-day basis the storms that livestock sector is addressing. The livestock farmers are losing livestock in big numbers, and floods and droughts happen in the same season in Tajikistan. So it's the issues are real on the ground, and they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So something that we can come back to is how do we strengthen the national systems to help in the process of getting knowledge to the farmers. Now I turn to my good friend Adit Murthy. He's 100 times selected fellow. Congratulations recently. And he has done 2 decades of work in the last 5 years, in my opinion. Okay, so a lot of work. Tell us how we can work with you, and how do we take the digital and artificial intelligence type of, you are in the advanced frontier of the technology. Tell us how we can work with you, and what guidance you can give us.
Yeah, well, I'll try to, based on what we've done so far. So I'm the founder and CEO of Bhumitra, and Bhumitra works with farmers and ranchers and pastoralists and many such groups of people, stewards of the land all around the world, to help them to improve the carbon levels in their soils. And by doing so, both, of course, increase their crop yields and make them more food resilient and improve the food security, but also increase their incomes through the generation of carbon removal credits, which are sold into voluntary and compliance and many different types of markets in which they are monetized. So we enable this for farmers around the world. We work across around 10 million or so acres today, hundreds of thousands of farmers across mainly emerging markets. So Latin America, Africa, Asia, and countries ranging from Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Costa Rica, Kenya, Namibia, Botswana, Mongolia, India, and so on. And as we do this, how our model works is we engage with a multitude of different partners on the ground who help us with the last mile with the farmers. And you can think of these as a form of an extension system that we are ourselves building and helping to support through a variety of for-profits and non-profits. And in some cases, we're also seeing how to plug into the government extension systems as well to enable this to happen. And as the farmers are getting trained, they adopt the improved practices that lead to carbon sequestration and soil health improvements. Anything from cover cropping, composting, mulching, reduced tillage, rotational grazing, variety of different regenerative agriculture practices are adopted and carried out. And as they are carried out, over time the carbon levels increase, and that increase, we have built an AI platform that enables the implementation and monitoring of these kinds of projects. And for measuring the increase in carbon that happens, or the change rather that happens, we have developed a satellite and AI-based system using over 100 plus satellites along with our proprietary AI system to directly measure carbon levels on land, including in the soils. And then we see the difference in soil carbon before and after a few years of implementation, because it takes a few years for changes to start to be observable. And then that increase in carbon, we then go get third-party certified and internationally recognized and turned into a carbon removal credit, which we sell both to voluntary corporations buying it for voluntary purposes, but also for compliance purposes we sell in some jurisdictions. For example, we have right now about over $100 million in offtake contracts with buyers of these high-quality carbon removal credits that we are generating, all the way from aviation companies, tech companies, energy companies, logistics companies, variety of different companies. One company, for example, from this particular region of the world, who is a big client of us from this region, is actually DP World, who is based in the UAE. But another example of a compliance transaction we recently announced a project in Mongolia where we did an agreement with the government of Mongolia, Ministry of Ag and the Ministry of Environment, to create a grassland project there and then get their stamp of approval to then export the credits to Japan, where they could be used in the near future for compliance purposes under the ETS in Japan. So these are different ways to monetize what is going on. But then coming back to the topic of this panel here, we are really focused on how we can build and empower these kinds of extension systems, which now come in a variety of different forms that we engage in, both our private ones or we also try to plug into some public ones, and empower those extension officers to be the front lines of the change happening with the farmers. So that happens both from a financial perspective, but also from a capacity perspective with us. So on the financial side, whenever we sell the carbon credits, the vast majority of the revenue from those carbon credits, the gross revenue from those carbon credits, is going back to the farmers and local communities. So those extension officers on the ground there, they are getting a percentage too. They are getting paid for their work directly from climate finance that's coming through our projects. And as I just mentioned, there's over $100 million that we have already been able to lock in our contracts. But there's even more coming, and these frontline folks will finally be able to tap into that. That is what we're trying to do on the financial side. So at least the financial incentives start to be a bit better. But secondly, we've also started to develop more technologies to enable these extension workers to do even more. One of those aspects is how can the extension workers individually help more farmers? Right now, I commonly see that an individual extension officer, if you want them to do a really good job, they're only really able to help like 30 to 50 farmers really well. They can't really go much bigger than that. But if you think about those salespeople in other industries who are working on managing many contracts, or think about the people who call you at dinner time trying to sell you something on the phone. Those people manage 300 to 500 to 1,000 different contracts or opportunities. We want our extension officers to be able to expand similarly, enabled by technology. So we have developed a suite of software tools for them, but one of the most interesting is our recent deployment of Gen AI actually. So we have created a Gen AI voice agent, which is called Mitra, which means friend in Sanskrit. And even our company name, Mitra, by the way, means friend of the earth. That's our company name. But we have launched Mitra starting in India and Mexico right now, where it's a voice agent where the farmers and the extension officers can actually call in and have an engaging conversation directly with our voice agent, which it's 90%, it's getting close to being 90% as good as a human, but hopefully we'll be able to get higher and higher, and then we're able to actually supplement what the extension officers are doing extensively with using technologies like this. Because in our field, we are not actually worried as much about getting rid of human labor or something. It's rather we don't have enough human labor and accomplished labor that can actually do this extension services. So with these technologies like this, we are hopeful that we'll be able to expand the capacity of extension both through the right financial incentives, but also the right technology tools and knowledge. And one last thing I want to just say here is we probably have one of the first such teams in the industry, which I call a carbon hacking team. We have a team internally that's composed of people with both agronomy and engineering backgrounds, but it's not pure agronomy, but it's carbon hackers, as we like to call it. There are people who are out there trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work from across the world and share that knowledge internally and to our various partners and to our farmers so that they can learn and they can move much faster. Because one of the things that we definitely see a lot of is there's not enough knowledge sharing of what works and what doesn't work across the different parts of the world. And it's definitely segmented by language barriers as well. So Spanish-speaking parts of the world, French-speaking parts of the world, English-speaking parts of the world, Arabic-speaking parts of the world, or Russian-speaking, they're not talking enough to each other to the point that we're able to meaningfully understand, oh, something worked really well here, let's make it work here in the other place. Well, we have a team that works especially on that, and then it's also fed into our Gen AI prompts as well, so farmers in a different place can immediately get access to that knowledge and immediately start working in the right direction. So we have all these different sorts of programs. Hopefully we can extension with these and make it much better.
Okay, thank you, Adit. The technology, the finance, incentives, you brought it nicely together, and let's keep talking, particularly on the ground. How do we change things? Now I move to Mr. Marcelo. He heads the Global Methane Hub. They are also on the ground. They are doing several projects on the ground, excellent projects to meet the demands that are coming out, particularly on the methane side and extension side. Marcelo, please give us your perspective.
Great, thank you. So when you hear about methane, in this COP, you've heard many things on how we could track methane leaks from space, natural gas, oil and gas, and coal. But around 60% of methane emissions come from food production and food waste. And really, as temperatures rise, reducing methane is the fastest way to reduce temperature, and every tenth of a degree matters. But of course, we come from this from a perspective that I think it has been historically a mistake to pit farmers and climate action against each other in the context of the things that could be achieved. In many ways, the farmers are stewards of the earth and are not the cause of the problem. And therefore, we need to find ways in which we could collaborate. And so, therefore, it's clear that we need to bring local benefits with our work. And so, one local benefit, I'll just talk briefly on livestock before I head into rice, because most of the emissions are from livestock and rice production. In the case of livestock, many of the production systems are not optimized. And you could increase the productivity substantially by improving the way that you feed animals with better formulations. So an animal in Europe maybe generates 25 liters of milk per day, and maybe one in Kenya, maybe around 3 to 4. And that difference is whether they're going to make ends meet at the end of the month or not. And so working to improving that feeding is really important. So for that, we teamed up with Princeton, with Cornell, with UC Davis, and around 8 different extension system services in the Global South, in India, and other places like that, in which we developed a feed ration formulation tool which serves 2 purposes. One is to allow farmers to understand what are the different feed sources that they have nearby that are locally sourced, that are going to be resilient with changing climate, and help them formulate and to increase the productivity. I think this is really important. But with that, we also collect information that allows us to estimate what the emission factors are. Therefore, we could better characterize the production system. So it serves that purpose, and it is working very well. I'll give you how we're working in Morocco. Danone has a productivity issue in Morocco. Danone wants to produce more, and their farmers have this issue. And the difference for them is because if that farmer does not have enough money to make ends meet, likely will migrate to urban areas, and it will be in an unplanned manner, and it will cause social unrest. So therefore, there is a win-win for social aspects, for economic aspects on this. And we could stop the rising of emissions and having the same animals produce more and meet that over there. So I think this approach will also be very important in places like Brazil, in which COP 30 will be held, in which the productivity gains could also stop the demand for deforestation, because you could put more animals in the same amount of hectares. So this is really positive. Also, there is a resilience angle. An animal that is not resistant to heat will produce less. An animal that is not in a place that could protect itself from heat also will produce less. So therefore, we're exploring ways in which operational improvements that could actually protect animals so they are heat resistant, and therefore produce more and keep the income for the farmers. In the case of rice, the challenge is even more compelling, and we're working with Suresh in this matter. In India and many other places in which rice is produced, water scarcity is becoming more common. And in many ways, we have not done the research that we should have done necessarily to select rice species that are resilient to drought and produce more. And so therefore, we could find ways with current technologies to reduce water use around 30%, and this will also allow reducing the flooding, and that allows the reduction of the methane emissions which come from the decomposition. This is particularly important because the rising methane emissions in recent research has shown it's not coming from oil and gas. You could see from the isotopes, from the carbon markers, that this is from biogenic means. And so higher temperature will make this problem only worse. So the existing rice paddies will have less water, higher temperature, and the emissions will be potentially higher. So I think there's a really great opportunity to work together and bring resilience benefits to emissions reductions. And this coming year, we're going to launch a major initiative on research and development to accelerate what we could achieve on choosing better species. In the internal fermentation accelerator that we have, I just wanted to summarize that the last 2 years we've delivered, along with the Bezos Earth Fund, over $100 million in research for livestock emissions to be reduced, for selecting better animals that reduce emissions, for feed additives, for vaccines, and many other things. And we want to repeat the same process for rice because we just have not optimized this for the changing climate. And this is very common and very positive. And in my country, in Chile, we also see the implementation of these projects already with aerobic rice instead of anaerobic rice. Thank you.
Let's move on to Mr. Yeshi Lendab from Bhutan. As I mentioned, he is advising the government of Bhutan, and they've made a lot of good strides on the climate side as well as agriculture side. Yeshi, please.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me opportunity. By the way, my name is Ishelendu. I'm from Ministry of Finance of Bhutan. So I'll be mostly reading my questionnaires that I received in advance. So please bear with me. Actually, I've received a question stating how does Bhutanese agriculture system incorporate climate goals in their strategy? So in this case, Bhutan is one of the carbon neutral country, and in this case, so Bhutan's agriculture system integrate climate goals through the implementation of climate smart agriculture practice, which focus on the resilience to climate change, while improving the productivity. The government of Bhutan has prioritized sustainable development of natural resources. Natural resources as a part of its national strategy, recognizing that agriculture is vulnerable to climate change, such as water scarcity and soil erosion. So climate smart agriculture approach includes the natural measures like the crop diversifications, then the introduction of climate resilient crop varieties and efficient water management techniques, including rainwater harvesting and drip irrigation practice. Similarly, we have Bhutan has come up with the utmost importance on the organic practice of agriculture, and then we have also come up with our priorities area of food and nutrition in our security policy of 2023. Then policy requires the agriculture system to climate smart and disaster resilience, and the draft agriculture sector strategy for 2034 also underlines the promotion of climate smart agriculture system, technologies, seeds and seedlings, and even in our 13.5 plan, then at the present planning period, so we are mainstreaming the climate change across the entire value chain. For instance, the irrigation channels are required to be piped to avoid the water leakages or losses to the open channel. Then in addition, irrigation integrated channels are being promoted to address both the irrigation water shortages and drinking water shortages. And we have also developed our low emission development strategy for the food place. So similarly, we are actually has a strong commitment to continue environmental and climate steward in different national and sector policy, where the first and second national determined contribution identified intervention to mitigate GNH emission. The National Adaptation Plan integrates adaptation priorities in developing development plans, including the climate resilience and livestock management. The low emission development strategy for food security identified the low emission development pathway, like organic fertilizers, perennial crop productions, small scale biogas productions, and long term low greenhouse gas emissions. And the climate resilient development strategy identified the adaptation measures like innovative irrigation infrastructure development, improved livestock breeding, and crop insurance for agriculture as a priority sectors. So this climate specific strategy fits into our food and nutrition strategy policy 2023. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yashi. Thank you for. I know you are in the finance ministry, and you have to consult your agricultural ministry colleagues to come to this. But we did want to bring, because where the money is, you guys allocate money to Ministry of Agriculture. We want to identify what are the constraints for you in allocating resources to ministries of agriculture, and that too because the extension systems are facing constraints, public extension systems particularly. So this is just an introduction of various perspectives of the issues. How can we get the action on the ground that can combine both the innovations to the farmers and bring the technology not only in the context of agricultural productivity but also sustainability and the carbon sequestration. There's a wide range of things that happen on the ground in the farm level, but how do we help them to achieve that multiple goals at the same time, right? So the second round will focus a little bit on the countries that you are representing and the projects that you are representing in terms of what can we do, just 1 to 2 things to move things forward in the national systems. If we have to go work with the Minister of Agriculture, what should we be telling the Minister for Agriculture to do? That's something that we want to compile as a synthesis from this and make it a policy brief, contributions from all of you. And that focused kind of answering will also help our audience to ask questions after this round of your intervention. Please bear with us, we are going to come back to you on specifics. But what can we tell our ministers that we are dealing with in order for them to take action towards empowering the system, extension system, as well as reaching out to the farmers? Let's start with colleague from Fiji.
Thank you very much. Coming back to where I left off, whatever I introduced before, when I heard my colleagues up here describe what they do, I was going to ask our friend from with the IT company if, whether you can come to Fiji, and also from the our other colleagues, our finance. So from government, all we have to do is create those facilitative policies. There are some policies that are not relevant anymore because probably they are very old. Those have to be reviewed and new policies have to be formulated in order to address the current needs. So the challenge that we face presents us with an opportunity to develop. So the connectivity, when our extension officers are not connected to them, to technology, to innovations, to whatever, they cannot pass this message to the farmers. Our farmers as well, being connected to the extension officers, those are very important. And it comes down to finance. So with building up the budget of Ministry of Agriculture, of Extension, to see that budget is channeled to the right places where we will expect impacts and outcomes of the work that we do. Otherwise, it remains at project implemented and another project proposed, instead of realizing outcomes that we want to see in the country, and we see a fruition of services that we deliver. Thank you.
Okay, so you touched upon policy change due to the changes in the demand for new set of information coming, and along with that there is need for technology and improvements in the technology that helps farmers to reach the extension workers and vice versa, and extension workers to reach to the research and the evidence that's coming out of research, and finally the finances. How do we finance these three? Thank you very much. Now let's move to Mr. Sino from Tajikistan.
Thank you very much, Suresh. I think that was a really good question. What can we do? Because we also have to ask ourselves, what should we do? So that is the two very different concept questions, and we have to understand that sometimes we can do less or more than what we should do. I think right now we are at the situation where we can do or we are doing less than what we should do, and we are already beyond the time frames that we have. So therefore, I think it's really important to use the knowledge sharing and information very rapidly and quickly in order to be able to catch up. Because, for example, if you talk about Tajikistan, if you talk about the decision made up in the capital, let's say in Dushanbe there is a decision. Then we have a Murgab area, which is 2 days drive from the capital. And you cannot fly there. You have to drive there, and it takes you 2 days with the stop. So, with these 2 days, let's say something important, something urgent. Of course, there is a way to do to deliver some political messages, some, I don't know, security, whatever it is. But if we talk about the policy level things, if we talk about, you know, some comments on some decision, on some government paper, then it takes time. It stops the process. And if you even if you go there, the internet is not that quick there. It's not LTE, it's not 5G, it's just 3G, and you know, all that sort of thing. So I think we have to adjust and to understand what is the best way to deliver the information there. So I think in that particular case, it would be the radio, because you can go there and you can see that, you know, the radio is on the streets, the radio is in the local guest houses who are working there with the tourists. And I think in that particular case, we have to understand that, you know, we cannot do just to issue the policy paper and say, okay, they will do it on their own. In that case, we have to go through the radio. There are some other parts that you have to still go with the newspapers, yeah, with the paper itself. And of course, you can say, you know, it's cool to use WhatsApp, less paper, climate change. It's nice. I get it. But then whether it will work in that particular case or not, that is the real question. So I think we have to adjust, we have to understand where the real problem is, and we have to understand how we can do the real step towards finding the solution. But if we take the general things, the general mottos, the general things that you can say and everyone will agree, trying to make it more neutral, trying to make it more fun, more reliable to everyone, then that could be on certain level. But if we're talking about the ground, if we're talking about the specific cities, the specific villages, then we have to adjust. So that would be my main reply to your question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The issue of remoteness is real. And how do we take the technology to the people who are on the remote? And of course, appropriate technology is important. You can't just assume that everybody will have internet when we talk about digital. And while talking about technology, what is that, Adit, that you expect the government to support private sector like you, and what can we tell the ministers?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we see in many countries, but maybe some of the folks in our panel are a bit more advanced than that, but in many other countries what we do see is there tends to be a lack of coordination between the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Environment in many countries. So many of these climate topics, they think, it's Ministry of Environment topic. Ministry of Agriculture, we do what we usually do and we continue doing that. Or even if they do have a dedicated climate person in the Ministry of Agriculture, that climate person in the Ministry of Agriculture is not always included in the conversations that the Ministry of Environment is having with other stakeholders. So because of these coordination issues, we do see some issues. But from our perspective, we actually try to engage with both the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Agriculture for our projects, because from the Ministry of Environment side, we always need their approval that we will generate carbon sequestration in their country and be able to sell that carbon sequestration. That's important. And then from the Ministry of Agriculture side, we always want their support to reach more farmers in their country. So when we engage, we always try to engage with both of these groups. One of the basic things that we feel that could really push a lot of this action forward much faster from the government angle is much cleaner inclusion of this stuff in the NDCs. Much cleaner inclusion of agricultural climate action in the NDCs. Now, many NDCs actually do include agriculture from an adaptation perspective. But I think the time is also here for more NDCs to include agriculture from a mitigation perspective as well. And right now, there's only about like 14 or 15 NDCs in the world that actually include soil as a uh, mitigation potential of soil as something within the NDC. So including more of that in the NDCs can actually both help frame the policy frameworks locally so that it's aligned in the proper way, but also enable the channeling of international climate finance when it's clear that the country is being focused on this, and that's when we can actually also generate compliance credits. There's some jargon around why that is the case, but having the NDC properly aligned is very important. So right now, actually, many countries, it's required for countries to update their NDCs by February 15th, I believe is the deadline. So many countries are scrambling to update their NDCs right now. It's a crucial time right now, at least for my company, to help as many countries to add agricultural items to their NDC, both to the adaptation and mitigation aspects together. And then I think the policy framework starts to be aligned in a proper way so that the right technologies can be deployed and right things can be brought towards the ground. And talking about the remoteness and access to technology, it's very interesting. We actually have many clients who are interested to help farmers get access to the technology. We have had clients buy tons and tons of smartphones just to hand out to our farmers. So we have many clients who are interested as part of their ESG and CSR strategy to help farmers at scale. So the capital is available. If we set up the right process here to enable that capital to come in and be beneficial through putting it into the NDCs and enabling compliance access to these projects or a variety of different means, that is the way to go. And I think that is a clean way for us to enable this to grow much faster. Because too much of the conversation around the NDCs has been around renewable energy and protecting existing forests, but we need to bring agriculture and land use in a much bigger way to these NDCs, and then I feel technology can actually accelerate. So we engage with both the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Environment on these topics, and we also in some cases help coordinate themselves between each other when they are not talking to themselves. But that is the reality, and that is where we sit.
Thank you, Adit. The importance of coordination at the national level, we keep talking about it, but the ministries are designed in silos, right? In that when you go at the national level. But how do we bring them together? It's fundamental. How do we bring agriculture to the center of the debate in terms of updating the NDCs? It's very important. We are in a crucial period right now. And if you miss this window of opportunity to update the NDCs, bring in the land use issues, sustainability issues, biodiversity issues, and we will miss out. And action is called for right now. So thanks for bringing that up. But by the way, our colleagues are very important. This Sino advises the minister. Minister just called him. Of course, Marcelo already told me that he had to go for another bilateral meeting. Bear with us. And let's move to Bhutan. Yeshi, what will you tell your Minister for Agriculture?
Thank you, and my apologies, please bear with me. So I'll just read some of the context that I've got from the Ministry of Agriculture. So in terms of the Ministry of Agriculture's design extension program by leveraging real-time climate data and vulnerability assessment to inform the farmers about the effective agriculture practice under the changing climate condition. This program emphasizes training on climate-smart agriculture technology, then promoting practice such as mulching, then greenhouse enhancement, and the use of drought-resistant crop activities, crop varieties. Then the ministry collaborated with the local governance basically to reach out to the remoteness and the agriculture cooperative to disseminate knowledge and skill among the farmers, ensuring that the extension services are tailored to the specific challenge faced by the rural communities. Similarly, like crop rotation, intercropping is a practice in Bhutan. Organic farming such as use of the farmyard manure is very prominent in our country, Bhutan. And in fact, the use of chemical fertilizers is very much limited. So capacity building of farmers on the climate smart agriculture practices such as greenhouse management, integrated pest management, drip and sprinkle system to manage water resources, improve livestock breeds such as the Jersey are promoted, and widely rare farmers in Bhutan. Given the productivity, such schemes has helped in reducing the less productivity animals, thereby reducing pressure on the pastures and environment. Biogas are promoted in the communities which reduce pressure on fossil fuel such as wood, and the above intervention are rolled out to the farming communities through donor-funded projects and regular program of the government. Similarly, the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock has a strong research center, the Agriculture Research and Development Center and National Dairy Development Center that work continuously to identify new threats of Bhutan agriculture system, identify and research appropriate tools to adopt for the mitigate to the risks, develop and test new solution and tools in research setting, and then appropriate demonstrate these new tools to farmers before the new interventions are being released on the market. After following this rigorous development process, these new technology and tools are fit into the national extension, and the public officials are trained to the new technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Yeshi. You have brought information from the ministry of what they are doing already, and that's a success story in many cases for Bhutan, because you are working combination of the forestry land and agricultural land and meeting the food security on the one hand, but also achieving the forestry goal beyond the goals that you set for yourselves, actually more land than they actually targeted. Now with that, let's open for questions and answers, and feel free to just give your own perspective from where you are coming from, what you are doing. So let's make it as a dialogue, not question and answer. Please feel free to jump in. Shall we take questions from you? Yeah, go ahead, please. Introduce yourself, and we'll follow it up as needed.
I'm Jacqueline. I'm from Brazil, from a think tank that discusses food systems. And I'd like to hear from you all about the costs, which is necessary to provide very effective extension systems, and where can the money come from? It's very important, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. From Brazil, I mean, Brazil has a unique system of agrarian ministry on the one hand, working for smallholders and quilombolas and so on. And then you have a huge commercial agriculture as well. And very good examples can be learned from Brazil itself. But what about the cost? Let's take it. I mean, we talked about the finances. When we move from the in-person extension to digital extension, actually cost should go down. But what about the costs that involve in doing the digital extension, for example?
Yeah, I think the first stage is to get data from the ground on about what challenges you're facing right now, and about how do you cost that. And so data is very important, and I know that my friend here relies on data to move, and with data we can reach out to partners, development partners, in order to get the finance that we are after for development. Countries as small as Fiji, we don't have the money to adapt or to mitigate. Whatever budget we have in government is to build resilience. But money to adapt and progress to develop food has to come from outside. So that money is accessible through proper data.
So I've received a similar question in 4 other panels I've done at this COP. Very similar question. But of course, like, one of the themes of this COP is finance, so it makes a lot of sense, right? To answer your question, though, in our case, we are able to package these large. So we operate large-scale carbon projects which span millions of acres and involve thousands upon thousands of farmers in each of these projects, and many thousands of. In some cases, there are thousands of extension workers as well involved in some of these projects. So since with that level of grouping, those individual projects are able to access different types of financing. There's obviously the sale of the credits aspect, but when we have a blue chip off-taker of the carbon credits from our project, we are then able to go and rely on project debt and project equity entering into these projects. So these are forms of financing that our projects are able to seek because there's a certain offtake and a certain track record of implementation and so on. So there's a certain guarantee that money will come in. They're able to raise certain forms of capital from international investors, banks, trading houses, and so on. They're willing to finance our activities. And especially, there's also DFIs who are willing to finance these activities, developmental finance institutions, at a relatively lower cost of capital, because they also want to promote climate action projects like ours. But it's not a direct grant money in our case, because it's a type of financing to our project that will be repaid as the carbon credits are generated and sold to the end clients. So we are able to leverage a piece of that financing actually to provide payments to our partners and representatives for them to have the financing to even be on the payroll to go and do what they need to do. So we are able to access such forms of capital, which are way more meaningful for the capacity building actually than to the. It's for an individual farmer who farms only a few acres, there's only so much payment that can come to them. But to a individual representative who's managing several dozens of farmers, the payments start to become quite interesting for them, and an interesting piece of the pie for them to sustain themselves and to be a part of the system. So basically, we are creating these extension systems that are funded through the climate finance and are being able to be funded through project finance, project debt, and project equity that's coming on top of the climate finance, that's enabling them to do what they need to do right now and extend forward. So we're able to tap into these sources because of the system that we have created at this point.
In case of Bhutan, so actually it depends on the financing sources. It depends based on the country status as such. So in the developing country, I mean the low developing countries, so actually the donors are coming forward to support and all. So once it is graduated, then we have challenges to in the sourcing of finance. So Bhutan till date we are under the low, I mean the developing countries, and we have been getting some of the grant support from like a climate window like a JEF, then adaptation fund from GSAVE, then similarly some of the philanthropies or foundations, and similar from the multilateral development bank as well. So they are financing, especially again it depends on the financing nature, also depends on the nature of the agriculture practice that we take up, whether it's a subsistence farming or it's for the export oriented basis. So basically in our context of Bhutan, we are actually self-sufficient or not really on oriented, export oriented. So from that perspective, our government is actually very generous enough to make it all the grant money allocated to finance in the agriculture sectors as such. Now, with the change in this economy nature, now in the contemporary, now we are also changing our planning process. Instead of self-sufficient, now we are also getting towards the export-oriented. I mean, taking the value chain where is targeting for the export orientation. So on that case, we are actually even going for the debt financing, but not in the very commercial rate, but at very concessional nature that we are availing from the ADB, World Bank, IFAD, and all those things. Similarly, now the climate change, climate finance is coming very in the top discussion and all those things. So we are also getting towards the innovative financing mechanism like a carbon financing, like pre-finance carbon, all those things. So these are some of the mechanisms we are following or practicing in our Bhutan context. Thank you.
Thank you, Yeshi. It's a very interesting discussion on financing, because when action at all, I mean, we have to do something on the ground, it requires money. So this all different perspectives on financing very useful. Let's go on to other questions. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hello. Hi, everyone. So my name is Rishav. I'm from India, but currently studying in Germany with a background of geography, and currently I'm in ecology field. So I have a couple of questions. First one is about Bhumitra, that what do you think about a method of reproductive agriculture as a tool for regaining carbon into the soil, the reproductive agriculture? Reproductive. Okay. So that one is my first question, and second one is to all of you three, that we are discussing as a scientific community about the matter of gaining carbon again in the soil and the utility of it, or climate resilience of food systems. But how does farmer sees of these things, or what are the farmer perspective, or how does Fiji and Bhutan also, like the farmer community, and how does they relate with it? Does they have any even acknowledgement over these issues, or how does you guys connect with them?
Let's start with that regenerative question and then address the farmer
Yeah.
perspective, then we go on the farmers.
Yeah, so we are lucky at Bhumitra that we have worked now with 100,000 plus farmers, and we have extensive data of what's been happening across those farms. And we were able to leverage that data actually to arrive at some insights. And that's through our carbon hacking team, actually, which I mentioned earlier. We were able to leverage that data and come to some insights. What is working? Where is it working? How is it working? And so on. And what we tend to see is that surely there's some very degraded areas in the world, and there's some less degraded areas in the world. And regenerative agriculture, you help to regenerate the areas that are more degraded, and the ones that are kind of in a pristine state. Just the pure regen ag practices are not the ones that will lead to further carbon sequestration there. There are other things that you can do. But how we view all of this actually is as a spectrum. Farmers start at one end of the spectrum, but they have to continually move up and up and up the spectrum. You don't start from 12th grade the day that you're born. You grow. You spend a few years at home, and then you go to preschool, and then you go to elementary school, and so on. You don't start at 12th already. So in a similar fashion, we help our farmers first start with some basic practices like composting, mulching, crop residue utilization. Then you go to cover crops, soil amendments, soil biologicals, and beyond. So there's a spectrum, and depending on where the farmer is, they can start at different points in that spectrum and sequester carbon and start their journey. But regenerative agriculture does work, but it has to be done in the proper way, in the proper areas where it will work. In the pristine areas, it still helps, but it won't lead to more sequestration if it's already in a pristine state. Then you might go to like novel soil amendments and soil biologicals and new technologies to actually get further soil carbon sequestration. But many areas of the world are actually not pristine. Soil degradation is a serious problem around the world, and in those areas specifically, we see significant improvements. One very quick story for you. I have visited a farmer in Kenya personally that experienced a 3xing of his maize yield in just 2 seasons. He has seen his maize yield go up by 3x. And the reason why in that particular case is they were not doing any crop residue management before, and once they started to do the crop residue management and putting the crop residues back into the soil, the carbon went up, but the moisture also went up in the soil because they don't have irrigation there. It's all rain fed. So once the moisture went up in the soil and the moisture was there in a more sustained way, the crops were going way more effectively. And I've personally seen that. And if you visit that particular farmer, you would see that his yields are way dramatically bigger than the neighboring farm where there are only a few stalks of maize coming out of the ground. So there's very stark differences. So it really depends on where you start, where's the baseline, and then that depends on how much you can actually accomplish. But coming back to the question of farmers, why do they adopt this? How do they adopt this? Is it possible? For the most part, we have seen farmers to be pretty amenable to these concepts, with the right capacity being built for them, and the right trainings and the right management plans and support being given to them. And then, of course, it might take a few years for them to start to increase the crop yields. But this is why we work very closely with the right local implementation partners, in our case, that have the local relationships with the farmer. Because if you hear this from someone who is trusted in your local community, the trusted local extension officer, uh, or the trusted representative in your community, telling you, let's do these practices and increase your yields and also get paid through carbon credits, you're much more likely to follow through with that trust and start doing something. So that's what we utilize. We use many trusted networks to do this. So when we do that, we actually find the farmers to be pretty amenable and pretty interested to get going and to start seeing what is happening, at least in our case. But I'll leave it to my other governmental colleagues for their perspective.
Yeah, thank you for the adoption of this. What we usually do from experience is build farmers' trust. So the relationship with farmers, when they trust you, when they trust the government or extension officers, they will adopt. And as mentioned by Bumitra, it's more of like presenting a carrot and a stick. When you do this, you gain more yields, and you receive a carrot. But if you do otherwise, you continue to face more challenges, and you face a stick, which is penalties for what you do in terms of environment degradation and all those other things. And building the trust and relation is the best important tool for an extension officer. Thank you.
Okay, so Bhutan, what is the farmer's perspective?
Excuse me, what is the question? In case of Bhutan, so as per my knowledge, firstly I second the Fiji colleagues, so it's a trust and confidence between the government and the community. So basically, like we go with the extension as well as cooperative approaches as well. So in terms of corporate approaches, so basically at the current juncture, what our government is encouraging is like a sustainable land management through corporate approaches, where they are going for the legume plantations all in a large scale. It's a dual benefit, win-win. I think both objective, like a land management as well as they are coming up with some returns, and where they are getting towards the carbon trading as well, and also like a million tree plantations scheme they have introduced, where all the communities are getting towards the plantation of large scale in approach. So these are some of the things that recent initiatives are happening in my country. Thank you.
Thank you, Veshi. Any more questions? Yeah, we can dialogue also. Give your perspectives, what your experience. Please, introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. It is a very useful panel and discussion. Actually, we have much appreciated. My name is Abdurrahman from the Ministry of Livestock, Forest and Rangeland, Federal Government of Somalia. I'm very happy to be here, a part of this discussion team. My question is, I think the topic is very important for when it comes to food security and food systems, also for climate resilience. In our region, there is facing significant climate resilience when it comes to the food system, is food security. When it comes to food security, it's like crop production and livestock also. I think Bhutan is also was discussed and the more important for livestock in the region. The question is, what funding mechanisms are required to sustain long-term reforms in extension systems for climate resilience, and which area that the funding mechanism is expecting to come from? So that is what I want to ask the panel. Thank you so much.
So he's talking about what type of reform we may need, and funding mechanism we already talked about. Maybe you came a little bit later. But how do we go about doing these reforms at the national level? Maybe we can think about, you have a system in place right now. What kind of changes, reform is probably a big word, but what kind of adjustments and changes are needed in order to meet the current demand? That's what.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question of the fellow colleague from Somalia. And for government of Fiji, we try. The reason government coming in now in the running for 2 years is looking into building or empowering household level, so households. People empowerment is very important, and to achieve that, you have to put money in their hands through the work that they do to achieve. And so funding mechanisms coming through that. There's a lot there that we propose to outside government in order to come and build the capacity of our farmers or our officers in order to raise the standards of these households. So going through the long channel of funding, we know that it's a never-ending pipeline when it will take a turnaround to have a feedback to the government. But there's something I heard 2 days ago, is building funding, innovative fundings within the region that is suited for the Pacific. And this is a Pacific resilient financing. So Pacific resilience financing is one of the new financing arms of climate change that deals with the Pacific Island states. And it is something that also can be done in various areas around the world. Because when I heard of that, I knew that this is something that can really benefit our farmers in a flexible financing. Because when disaster happens, there is financing there readily available to be mobilized, not being proposed up a channel that farmers might never see. So building small mechanisms like that really helps.
Okay. Ishi, you want to add anything to that? Because it's a government question.
Thank you, the colleague from Somalia, for bringing up this question. So, indeed, if I jump into direct to the funding mechanism, so definitely funding mechanism is very much challenging. So, because of the demand and limited supplies coming from all the other partners and all. So, as mentioned by my Fiji colleague, so now the very opportunity we could depend is the innovative kind of way mechanism, like innovative in the sense like creating a seed money from the very beginning, so where we can either invest in other kind of returns of the capital pool, or like we can make a community responsibility to come forward to put some smaller like a cent or something to make it more growth for the future thing. This is one of the thing. Then other one is through like a crowdfunding raising to make a good amount, good funding mechanism in our domestic area. And this crowdfunding can be even go to the international level as well. So given a good proposal, so I think definitely some philanthropy, some foundation, they will come forward for the to support on that front. And others like normal funding is going to be, if we have a good management, right, they have trust and confidence, and we'll have continued flows on that part. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishi. We have few more minutes if anyone has a question. Okay, thank you, and yeah, go ahead.
Thanks so much for the panel. My name is Lisa, and I'm with One Acre Fund. And I was interested, I had a question for you, Adith, on Bumitra. And I was wondering, you mentioned the use of technology in extension, but I was curious to hear how you're thinking about it for these very intense practices that would require more, like, I think we call it high-touch extension at One Acre Fund, like things that farmers need, you know, the extension officer to work with them. How are you navigating technology with that? And how are you balancing that trust that needs to be built versus technology, which can be maybe limited in that way.
Thank you. Can we take a couple of more questions if you have, and then we will ask the panelists to address it all. Any more? You have a question or answer to that?
No, question first.
Question. Yeah, go ahead.
The question goes to Bhumitra. So how does a country or organization can contact to work with the group?
So that's the whole objective of bringing both of you on the same panel, so you can work together. Yeah, Bhumitra.
So we have had a lively dialogue actually with your colleagues at One Acre Fund, including John Mundy and others, actually on similar topics. In terms of working effectively with farmers, I don't think we have a good replacement for human touch yet, right? We don't have a good replacement for human touch. So what I mentioned earlier in this panel, maybe I don't remember whether you were here at that point or not, is all that we want to do is enable the existing humans to manage more farmers. We want the existing extension officers to be able to work with way more farmers than they work with today. Now, they could work with way more farmers, but the quality goes down. We want to maintain good quality and have them work with way more farmers, and I think that's where the technology can really help and come in. Because in our carbon projects, actually, there's a lot of monitoring requirements from the farmers, like, did you do this, did you do that, blah, blah, blah. If the extension officer has to go and do all this monitoring, it's way too much work for them. Now, what if the farmer can leave voice notes with us, or can actually call in and talk to our Mitra LLM, our Gen AI, and the Gen AI can process the voice notes itself and give us the instructions as well on what was said and populate our database directly. There are all these various tweaks which we didn't have a chance to go into in depth in this particular panel, but we think that these kinds of technology elements will drive down the amount of time that needs to be spent by an individual extension officer to fully manage a given farm to the highest possible quality, while maintaining good quality levels throughout in the engagement. So I don't think the human touch can be replaced yet, because the trust is necessary, and it's the trust that actually drives the practice change, as I said previously. But I think that we can achieve more efficiency and enable the same folks, because it's very hard to find the folks to do the extension services. We don't have enough trained people out there to do the extension services, and even people are not interested to get into these jobs. But hopefully this kind of innovative technology makes some people more interested. But with the existing people that we have and the existing pipeline that we have, what can we do? That's the question that I'm trying to answer. And so we need the human touch. We can't get rid of it. Actually, coming over to my Fiji colleague's question, how can we work together? Certainly. So we welcome everyone to work together with us. Like, we are we basically run on partnerships. And what I always tell folks is, I live in San Francisco Bay Area, but it's not my job to parachute in from the San Francisco Bay Area to your small village and tell you what to do. If I did that, no one would trust me and no one would believe what we have to say. So that's why we partner with so many different folks. And we'd love to partner with all of you to come to your countries and enable the change to happen there locally. And there's something in it for everyone. In our model, as I said, 75% of the money goes back to the farmers and local communities, but it's actually a win-win-win situation. It's a win for the buyers who come to us and provide the climate finance. It's a win for us. It's a win for the farmers. It's a win for the local communities. It's a win for the local governments. And it's a win for the planet. So that's the idea and vision with our business model, and we really want to work with everyone. But happy to chat more about specifics about what we could do in your country.
Okay, Yeshi, very good, Adit.
Just to my previous answer, I would like to supplement for the Somaliya. So another funding mechanism is like we should, in keeping with our NDC, then with our adaptation plans and all. So we need to come, if we have a good bankable investment plan, adaptation investment plan, and then if we can go forward to the donors, if we can present. So I think some potential donor will come forward for tech as a investor. So we should have a good investment planning. I mean, bankable project, programmatic as a priority based on the government planning and all. So to give us a menu for them to have some choice. So that could be one of the strategy we have to look. So in our case of Bhutan, in case of this agriculture, food and all those things, so we are working closely with the World Bank to come up with a bankable investment plan for the agriculture, food and security. Thank you.
Adit want to say something.
Just to add very quickly to my Nepal colleague, actually, one of the things we've been working. Sorry, Bhutan colleague. Sorry, Bhutan colleague actually. One of the things we've been working really hard on over the past few years is actually demonstrating first-of-a-kind projects all around the world. Because what banks don't like financing is first-of-a-kind when they have no idea what is going on and it's too risky for them. So now I think we've built a portfolio of case studies from around the world of projects that actually seem to be working, so that the next set of projects that actually come in, they're way more bankable now. There's a key idea. So when you think about like bankable projects, three things come to mind. You need to have limited market risk. You need to manage for the market risk. You need to have less technology risk. You can't have too much technology risk. And then you must have very low execution risk. If you manage execution, marketing, market, and technology risk, then your project becomes very much bankable. And that's what we've been working very hard on demonstrating with our initial projects, which we have about 5 projects now that have gotten to that kind of a stage. And hopefully the next set of projects that we do bring on can be bankable from very early stage and move forward. Yeah. So, but that's important. Demonstration and case studies have to be there.
Okay, Adit, all good things have to come to an end at some point, right? Thanks for joining us. But quickly to summarize, on the last 41.5 hours, we have been talking about extension systems. We talked about the broader policy perspective. What are the changes that are needed as we move towards climate smart agriculture, climate resilient agriculture, how agricultural strategies, agriculture policies should change in themselves. And we talked about how to integrate them with the ministries of environment and their approach to NDC and NAPs. And we talked about the importance of updating NAP that's coming up. All the countries are updating right now. The process is going on. And this window of opportunity is very fundamental for us as agriculturalists to work with the system in order to basically show the importance of land use kind of policies that should be there. And with that comes the importance of extension, importance of research, and educating the farmers and building the capacities and skills with the digital opportunities that we have. So we talked about that. We also talked about what are the issues on the ground in terms of the number of extension workers, how do we improve or leverage the existing number to do quality work, right? That we talked about. And about the innovative finances we talked about. And that requires understanding the landscape of finance at the country level, at the regional level, and at the global level. Who is financing agriculture? Who is financing climate change? How do we bring these finances together in an innovative way? And that bankable project that we talked about. How do we make them trust us that we can actually deliver on these projects, right? That's we talked about that. We talked about also at the national level, how do we work with the national systems to increase the funding for agriculture, agricultural extension. And that requires a little bit of a governance, right? Local governance, local communities, building the trust and working with them. And finally, about how do we incorporate the sustainability issues, land use issues in the long-term climate strategies. Coming back to the extension system itself, and we have seen that work very well during the Green Revolution period, because when the public extension was doing very well, and it was in person because demonstrations were happening to show how things are changing on the ground. And that kind of thing cannot be replaced, as Adit said. No, we need to work on the in-person extension, but improve the efficiency of these people in order to deliver on that. With that, let me thank all of you for attending this and sharing your views and thoughts, and let me thank the panelists. Give them a big round of applause for their time and effort. Thank you for coming, one and all, and it was a very good discussion. Thank you, Molly, for coming and introducing us. Thank you, everybody.